The town of Bitter Creek knew Ben as the silent man who fixed what was broken. He did not wear a lawman's star or a preacher's collar, but the tools of a blacksmith and carpenter. His ranch was small, neat, and quiet, a testament to a man who preferred the company of horses and honest work. For years, his neighbors had watched him, a sturdy man in his prime, working his land alone. The whispers started kindly, turned to pity, and finally settled into a firm decision. He needed a wife. It was Mrs. Agnes Bell, the postmaster's formidable wife, who took charge. She organized the women of the town, and they wrote letters, placed advertisements, and pooled their money. Ben knew nothing of it until the day Agnes marched into his workshop, her skirts brushing against the sawdust. "We've done it, Ben," she announced, her chest puffed with pride. "We've found you a solution to your loneliness. A fresh start." Ben set down his plane, wiping his hands on his apron. "My, what now, Mrs. Bell? Don't play coy," she chided. "A man can't live alone forever. It's not natural. We've arranged for prospects. Mail-order brides. Respectable women from back east looking for opportunity and a good man. They're arriving on the noon train tomorrow." Ben's jaw tightened. He felt the walls of his quiet life shudder. "I never asked for this, ma'am." "Sometimes a man doesn't know what he needs until it's right in front of him," she said with finality. "Be at the station. Wear your good shirt. And for heaven's sake, smile." The next day, the entire town seemed to gather at the Bitter Creek station, buzzing with excitement. Ben stood apart, his hat pulled low, feeling like a bull at auction. The train whistle screamed in the distance, and his stomach clenched. As the engine chugged to a stop, steam billowing, a curious line of women disembarked one by one onto the platform, arranged by Mrs. Bell and her committee. There was Anna, a willowy blonde with nervous eyes who spoke of poetry and city galleries. Next came Clara, rosy-cheeked and sturdy, who immediately began assessing the town's buildings with a practical eye. Then there was Louisa, a minister's daughter with a serene smile, followed by Beatrice, who had a sharp laugh and sharper wit. More followed, a teacher, a seamstress, a cook from a wealthy family. 10 women in total, each dressed in their best travel clothes, each with a hopeful, searching look in their eyes as they scanned the crowd, landing on the solitary man they had been told was their potential husband. Mrs. Bell beamed, presenting them like a winning hand of cards. "Well, Ben, what do you think? Take your pick. A fine selection, if I do say so myself. Any one of them would make a splendid rancher's wife." The town watched, holding its breath. Ben looked at the 10 women. They were all perfectly agreeable, handsome in their own ways, clearly chosen with care. But as his gaze moved from one expectant face to another, a deep unease settled in him. This was wrong. It felt like choosing a new plow horse. These women had traveled across the country on a promise, and he was supposed to point at one and seal her fate. The rest would be humiliated, stranded, their hopes dashed on a dusty platform. A heavy silence fell. The women's hopeful smiles began to waver under his prolonged, unsmiling scrutiny. Anna twisted her gloves. Clara's confident posture slumped a little. Ben's voice, rough from disuse and now from a rising tide of rebellion, cut through the quiet. "Mrs. Bell, you brought 10 women here." "That's right, Ben. The best of the lot. So, which will it be?" Agnes prompted, her smile growing strained. Ben took a slow step forward, his boots loud on the platform boards. He removed his hat, not in greeting, but as if to clear his head. He looked past the 10 women, past the proud townsfolk, his eyes scanning the train cars now emptying of other passengers. His gaze landed on the last car. A figure was still seated by a window, a dark shape against the glass. As the conductor moved along, the figure stood slowly, gathered a single worn carpetbag, and stepped down onto the platform, away from the main group. It was another woman. She was not dressed in fine travel clothes. Her dress was a faded brown, mended at the sleeve. She wore no hat, and her dark hair was pulled into a simple, severe knot. She did not look toward the gathering. She looked at the ground, then at the vast, empty horizon beyond the town, as if measuring its distance. Her face was not pretty in the conventional sense. It was all sharp angles and quiet shadows, and there was a stillness about her that was utterly different from the nervous energy of the others. She looked like someone who was used to being overlooked. Ben felt a strange pull, a recognition of a different sort of solitude. He watched as Mrs. Bell followed his gaze and her face puckered in distaste. "Oh, her," Agnes whispered, stepping closer to Ben. "Pay no mind. That's Lena. She wasn't on our list. She just came. No references, hardly a word to say for herself. She's not part of this. We told her she could find her own way." Lena seemed to hear her name. She looked up, and for a fleeting second, her eyes met Ben's. They were a clear, calm gray, like river stones. In them, he saw no expectation, no desperate hope, only a deep and resilient weariness. Then she looked away, shouldering her meager bag, preparing to walk away alone into a town that had already dismissed her. Something in Ben broke open. The injustice of the whole spectacle, the pressure, the neat little plan. It all crystallized in that one figure being dismissed as irrelevant. He wasn't choosing from a selection. He was refusing the entire game. His voice, when he spoke, was loud and clear, ringing with a decision that surprised even him. He pointed not at the 10 hopeful women, but at the lone figure turning to leave. "I don't want any of these," he said, and the crowd gasped. Mrs. Bell's hand flew to her chest. Ben's arm remained outstretched, his finger pointing like an accusation at the heart of their good intentions. Then he finished, his words dropping into the stunned silence like stones. "Give me the one no one wanted." A wave of stunned murmurs washed over the platform. Mrs. Agnes Bell's face flushed a deep, mortified red. The 10 chosen women stared, their expressions shifting from hope to confusion, then to a mixture of hurt and offense. They were the promised ones, the selected, and they had been publicly deemed lesser than a ghost in a faded dress. Lena, the object of the outburst, had frozen mid-step. She turned slowly, her gray eyes wide with disbelief, then with a flicker of alarm. This was not the quiet, anonymous arrival she had planned. She clutched her carpetbag tighter, a shield against the sudden, unwelcome attention. Ben, his own pulse hammering in his ears from the force of his declaration, walked toward her. The crowd parted for him as if he were carrying something contagious. He stopped a few feet from her, the dust of the platform settling between them. "Ma'am," he said, his voice lower now, meant only for her. "My name is Ben. I have a ranch a mile out. It's small. It's quiet. I've got a room that's empty." He swallowed, the reality of what he was doing crashing down. He wasn't offering poetry or pretty words, he was offering facts. "It's yours, if you want it. No promises. No expectations. Just a roof and a fair day's work if you're of a mind to help." Lena studied his face, searching for mockery or pity. She found neither, only a stubborn, awkward honesty that mirrored the hard lines of his features. She looked past him at the scandalized town, at the 10 beautiful women who represented a life she could never have. Here was a man offering not a fairy tale, but a refuge. A transaction with no pretty lies attached. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft but clear, carrying a faint, unplaceable accent that smoothed the edges of her words. "Why?" Ben considered. He could not explain the feeling, the sudden clarity that she, in her visible isolation, was the only honest part of this whole charade. "Because they picked them," he said, nodding slightly toward Mrs. Bell's group. "I didn't. I'm picking my own trouble, thanks all the same." A ghost of something, was it amusement? Touched Lena's lips and was gone. She gave one slow, firm nod. "All right." It was the simplest, most monumental agreement. Mrs. Bell sputtered forward. "Ben Miller, have you lost your senses? You know nothing about this woman. She could be anyone." Ben turned to face the postmaster's wife. "And I know nothing about those 10, either, ma'am. Except that you chose them. Today, I'll trust my own judgment." He tipped his hat to the group of brides, his expression apologetic but firm. "Ladies, I am sorry for your trouble. The town will see you right." He then offered his hand not to take Lena's bag, but to indicate the way. After a brief hesitation, she fell into step beside him, leaving the buzzing platform behind. They walked in silence past the staring faces, down the main street toward the livery where his wagon was hitched. The weight of the town's eyes was a physical pressure on their backs. The ride to the ranch was just as quiet, filled only with the creak of the wagon and the call of distant crows. Lena sat straight, her bag on her lap, watching the land unfold, the scrub grass, the stubborn rocks, the vast, unforgiving sky. Ben stole glances at her profile. She wasn't young, perhaps near his own age of 35. Her hands, resting on the bag, were work-roughened but slender. She carried herself with a tense readiness, like a deer at the edge of a clearing, when the small, tidy ranch came into view. The simple wooden house, the sturdy barn, the corral with 2 horses watching their approach. She let out a small, almost inaudible breath. It wasn't a sigh of relief or disappointment. It was an assessment. Ben showed her inside. The house was clean but starkly masculine. A main room with a hearth, a small kitchen area, a door to his bedroom, and another door to the empty room. He pushed it open. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, a peg on the wall, and a window looking out toward the mountains. Sunlight fell in a bright square on the bare wood floor. "It's plain," he said. "It's enough," she replied, walking in and setting her bag on the bed. Over a simple supper of stew, the silence began to thaw, not into easy conversation, but into a tentative exchange of necessary information. "I can cook. I can mend. I am good with animals," Lena offered, not looking up from her bowl. "I can use the help," Ben acknowledged. "Garden out back needs tending. Chickens could use a steadier hand. I do blacksmith and carpentry work for the town some days." She nodded. "That is fair." As the evening wore on and the fire crackled, Ben asked the question that had hovered in the air since the station. "Where did you come from, Lena?" She was silent for so long he thought she would not answer. Then she said, "Many places. Most recently, a mining town called Silver Vein, north." Her gaze was fixed on the flames. "I worked in a boarding house kitchen. Before that, a hospital laundry. Before that, other places. No family." No, the word was final, a door closing. "Why come all the way to Bitter Creek?" he pressed gently. This time, she looked directly at him, her gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "The advertisement said it was a quiet town. It said a man needed a wife and a helper. I am a good helper." She paused. "I did not expect a parade. I only expected a chance to be useful." Ben understood then. She hadn't come for a husband. She had come for a job. A position. Safety in utility. His choosing her had thrown her into a role she never sought. "You're useful," he said. "And this is a quiet town, mostly. Today, notwithstanding." He stood, collecting the bowls. "The room is yours for as long as you want it. We'll figure the rest as we go." That night, lying in his own room, Ben listened to the unfamiliar sound of another person breathing in his house. He wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake, bringing a complete unknown into the heart of his solitude. Across the hall, Lena sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, listening to the night sounds of a strange place, her hand resting on the worn handle of her carpetbag. She did not unpack it. The next morning, routine took over. Lena was up at first light. She found the flour, the salt, the coffee. When Ben came into the main room, drawn by the smell of biscuits baking, he found the table set and the kettle steaming. She worked with a quiet, efficient grace, saying little. Days fell into a pattern. She took over the garden, her hands coaxing green shoots from the stubborn earth. She fixed a tear in the kitchen curtain with neat, invisible stitches. The chickens grew plumper, their coop cleaner. She was, as promised, a good helper. But she was a shadow in his home, polite, capable, and utterly closed. The town, of course, was not quiet. Ben felt the curious stares when he went for supplies. He heard the whispers. He took in that strange woman. What do they even talk about? Mrs. Bell says she's hiding something. The other brides had been placed with families or had taken work in town, a constant, lingering reminder of his choice point one afternoon, a week after her arrival, Ben was repairing a hinge on the barn door when he saw Lena standing at the far fence, staring out at the western horizon. The setting sun painted her in gold and deep shadow. Her posture was not one of peace, but of a profound and lonely vigilance, as if she were waiting for something to appear on that empty expanse. Or as if she were watching to see if something was following her. In that moment, Ben knew with certainty what he had suspected. Lena wasn't just from many places. She was from trouble. She was hiding. And he, in his rash act of defiance, had not just chosen a helper, he had offered sanctuary to a fugitive. The knowing changed everything. Ben watched Lena with new eyes. He saw how she never sat with her back to a window. How she startled at the sudden crack of a branch, her hand freezing mid-task. How she studied every rider on the distant road from the cover of the garden rose. She wasn't just quiet, she was listening for a specific kind of silence to break. He didn't confront her. A man who valued his own privacy had no right to invade hers. Instead, he made quiet adjustments. He began leaving his rifle, cleaned and loaded, in a corner of the main room, something he'd never done before. He took longer routes on his way back from town, his eyes scanning the landscape not for game, but for unfamiliar signs. He was no longer just a rancher with a helper. He was a warden of an unspoken secret. The town's curiosity hardened into judgment. When Ben went to the general store, the friendly chatter died down. Mr. Peterson, the storekeeper, counted his change with a stiff expression. "Heard you got that garden of yours growing right well," he said, not meeting Ben's eye. "That's right," Ben replied, his tone neutral. "Funny, that," Peterson continued, busying himself with a crate. Mrs. Bell was saying how a woman who can make a desert bloom like that must have a real, particular set of skills. Learned somewhere specific, maybe. The insinuation hung in the air. Ben placed his coins on the counter with a deliberate click. The soil just needed attention. Same as most things. He left, feeling the man's gaze on his back. The real trouble started with Tom Harlow. Tom was a ranch hand for the bigger spread north of town, a man with a quick temper and a slow mind, who had fancied one of the rejected brides, Louisa. He'd taken Ben's choice as a personal insult. Ben found a section of his fence cut, not broken by an animal, but cleanly severed with wire cutters. A week later, one of his best hens was found dead outside the coop, not taken by a fox, but killed and left. Ben knew it was a warning, a childish and cruel one. He mended the fence in stony silence and buried the hen. He said nothing to Lena, but he saw the understanding in her eyes when she saw the fresh wire and the small, mounded earth by the garden. Her face grew paler, her movements even more soundless. The breaking point came on a market day. Ben needed nails and a new draw knife. Reluctantly, he asked Lena if she wanted to come, thinking the open bustle of town might be safer than leaving her alone. She hesitated, then nodded, pulling her shawl close around her shoulders as if it were armor. Bitter Creek was busy. They moved through the crowds, a silent pair. Lena kept her head down but her eyes up, missing nothing. They were at the Mercantile when Tom Harlow and two of his friends stumbled out of the saloon. Tom's eyes, bleary from midday drink, landed on them and sharpened with malice. "Well, look what the buzzards dragged in," Tom slurred, blocking their path on the boardwalk. "The hermit and his ghost woman." His friends chuckled. Ben stepped slightly in front of Lena. "Move along, Tom." "Or what?" Tom sneered. "You gonna set your quiet little witch on me? We all wonder what she's hiding. Ain't natural, a woman that don't talk. Maybe she's dumb. Or maybe she's got a reason to keep her mouth shut." He took a step closer, his breath sour. "Maybe she's a thief. Or maybe she's somebody's runaway wife. That it. You stolen another man's woman, Ben." The crowd stilled, watching. Ben felt a cold rage, cleaner and sharper than any anger he'd known. "You're drunk. Go home." Tom's hand shot out, not for Ben, but to snatch at Lena's shawl. "Let's get a proper look at you." He never touched her. Lena didn't flinch back. Instead, she moved with a speed that made Ben blink. Her hand came up, not in a slap, but in a precise, deflecting motion that caught Tom's wrist, twisted it slightly, and sent him stumbling off balance into the hitching post. It was no brawler's move. It was efficient, almost clinical, the kind of move someone learns to defend themselves in close, desperate quarters. Tom roared in surprise and pain, clutching his wrist. She broke it. The witch broke my arm. His friends surged forward. Ben moved now, placing his full body between them and Lena. He didn't throw a punch. He simply stood, a wall of work-hardened muscle and unwavering intent, his eyes like flint. The next man who takes a step spends the night in the doctor's office, he said, his voice low and deadly calm. You choose. The promise of real, unflinching violence from the usually quiet Ben Miller was more effective than any bellow. The men hesitated. The town marshal, drawn by the commotion, pushed through the crowd. What's the trouble here? Marshal Reed asked, his eyes taking in the scene. Tom started whining about his arm. Ben spoke over him. Tom tried to lay hands on Lena. He failed. He's drunk and looking for a fight he won't get from me today. The marshal, a practical man who disliked Tom Harlow, looked at Lena. That true, ma'am. All eyes turned to her. This was the moment, Ben thought. She would have to speak, to explain, to draw more attention. Lena lifted her chin. Her voice was a clear, cold thread in the tense air. He reached for me. I prevented it. I did not break his arm. He is a liar and a coward. She spoke with such absolute, unshakable conviction that Tom's bluster faltered. The marshal suppressed a smile. Tom, get yourself to the dock if you're hurt. Then get out of my town. Ben, you and your helper might want to head home. The walk back to the wagon was a gauntlet of stairs, but they were different now. Not just curious, but wary. Lena had not just defended herself, she had revealed a capability that didn't fit the story of a helpless kitchen maid. The ghost woman had teeth. The ride home was shrouded in a thicker silence than ever. The unspoken truth was now a physical presence between them on the wagon seat. She had skills she shouldn't have. He had defended her without question. They were bound together, not by choice, but by the consequences of it. As the ranch came into view, Ben finally spoke. That wasn't a move you learn in a laundry. Lena stared straight ahead, her profile carved from stone. After a long minute, she whispered, No. Are they coming for you, Lena? He asked, the question direct and bare. She closed her eyes, a tremor finally passing through her. I don't know, she admitted, the words torn from her. I hope not. I have been careful. But a man, the man I am running from, he does not like to lose what he thinks he owns. And he has long arms and a cruel imagination. Ben absorbed this. It confirmed his fears. What did he own? Me, she said simply, the word holding a universe of pain. My life. My labor. My silence. I was not a wife, I was property. When I found a way to run, I took it. I have been running for a long time. He pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard. The sun was dipping low, casting long, protective shadows from the barn. This is your life now, he said, not looking at her. This soil, these chickens, this garden, this quiet. I don't care about your yesterday, but I need to know about your tomorrow. Is it going to bring fire to my door? She turned to him then, her gray eyes full of a storm of emotions, fear, gratitude, shame, and a fierce, stubborn light. I do not know, she repeated, honest to her core. But if it does, I will face it. I will not let it burn you down for your kindness. You have my word. Ben nodded. It was not a promise of safety. It was a promise of solidarity. It was enough. That night, he moved the rifle from the corner of the main room and placed it just inside his bedroom door, closer to hand. He lay awake, listening. Not just for her breathing across the hall, but for the sound of hoofbeats on the hard-packed earth, for a voice in the dark calling a name that wasn't really hers. He had chosen the one no one wanted, and in doing so, he had chosen her war. The peace of his ranch was now a fragile ceasefire, and he knew, deep in his bones, that the real battle was still on the horizon. The ceasefire lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of heightened senses, where the call of a distant coyote could be a signal and a dust cloud on the horizon held a universe of threat. Lena moved through her chores with a new kind of intensity, as if trying to imprint the feel of the garden soil, the sound of the chickens, the solid lines of the house into her memory. Ben took to leaving her with the rifle, showing her its mechanism with brisk, practical instructions. She learned with the same quick, deft competence she did everything. He also began to fortify. It was not obvious, not walls or trenches, but a blacksmith's subtle reinforcements. He fitted stronger locks to the doors and shutters, forged from good iron. He placed a length of stout pipe by the back door. He made sure the axe was always sharp, the woodpile close. Their communication became a language of shared looks and silent agreements. The bond between them, forged in defiance and sealed in shared danger, was now tempered in steel. It was not the flowery love from the storybooks Mrs. Bell read. It was something tougher, more essential, a mutual pledge to protect what they had built. The end of the ceasefire came not with a dramatic thunder of hooves, but with a single rider at dusk. Ben was in the barn finishing up. Lena was at the well, drawing water. She saw him first, a dark shape against the molten orange of the setting sun. He rode slowly, purposefully, a big man on a tired horse. He was not from Bitter Creek. Lena's bucket hit the ground with a dull thud, water soaking into the dirt. She didn't run. She stood perfectly still, her hand drifting to the apron pocket where she kept a small, sharp boning knife from the kitchen. Ben emerged from the barn, sensing the change in the air before he saw the stranger. His eyes found Lena's posture, then followed her line of sight. He moved to stand beside her, not touching but close. A united front. The rider stopped at the edge of the yard, just outside the fence. He was a coarse-faced man with a thick neck and small, piggish eyes that missed nothing. His clothes were of good quality but travel-stained. His gaze swept over the ranch, dismissive, before landing on Lena. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. "There you are," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like stones grinding together. "Been a long walk, girl. You led me a fine dance." Ben spoke first, his voice cutting the evening air. "This is private property. You're addressing my wife." The word wife felt foreign and absolutely right on his tongue, a shield and a declaration. The man's smile didn't waver. He ignored Ben, his eyes glued to Lena. "Wife, is it? Fancy that. Doesn't change the facts. She's got a debt. A contract. She belongs back in Silver Vein, finishing her time." Lena found her voice, cold and clear. "There was no contract, Morgan. Only your fist and your threats. My time was served in suffering. It is done." Morgan, the man from her past, finally looked at Ben, his eyes assessing him as an obstacle, not a person. "She's a runner and a thief. Took earnings that weren't hers. I'm here to collect what's owed and bring her back. You can hand her over peaceful, or I can make a mess. Your choice, farmer." Ben didn't hesitate. He took a single step forward, putting himself squarely in Morgan's line of sight. "You heard her. You're leaving. Now. This is your only warning." Morgan chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. He shifted in his saddle, and his coat swung open just enough to reveal the butt of a revolver on his hip. Big talk for a man alone on a scrap of dirt. He is not alone. Lena's words were quiet but carried. She had not moved, but her stance had shifted, grounded and ready. She held the boning knife low at her side. It was a kitchen tool, but in her hand, it was a statement of war. Morgan's face darkened. He hadn't expected this solidarity. He'd expected fear, submission. He dismounted slowly, his hand resting near his gun. "Last chance. Walk away, farmer. This doesn't concern you." "Everything on this land concerns me, Ben said. His own hand was empty, but his mind raced through the distance to the rifle in the house, the pipe by the door, the hammer in the barn. Too far. Morgan went for his gun. It was not a fast draw, but it was confident. Ben was already moving, not toward cover, but in a low rush meant to tackle the man before the gun cleared leather. He never made it. A rock, smooth and fist-sized, shot through the air. It did not come from Ben. It came from Lena's direction, thrown with a whip-crack accuracy born of desperation. It struck Morgan square on the wrist of his gun hand with a sickening crack. He bellowed, the revolver discharging harmlessly into the dirt as it fell from his numbed fingers. Ben crashed into him then, and both men went down in a cloud of dust. Morgan was bigger, fueled by brutal strength, but Ben was fueled by something purer, the need to protect his home, his peace, her. They grappled, a brutal, silent struggle of grunts and scuffling feet. Morgan got a hand around Ben's throat. The world began to narrow, to darken at the edges. Then Morgan stiffened, his grip loosening. A sharp, pained gasp escaped him. Ben shoved him off and scrambled back. Lena stood over Morgan, her face pale but set in lines of granite. The boning knife was in her hand, its point darkened. She had not stabbed him in the back. She had driven it into the meat of his thigh, a painful, disabling wound, not a killing one. Her eyes were on Morgan's face, and in them was no triumph, only a final, cold severance. "The debt is paid," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. "In blood. My blood for years, and now yours. It is over. If you come back, I will not aim for the leg." Morgan clutched his bleeding thigh, his face a mask of shock and rage. He looked from Lena's resolved face to Ben, who was now on his feet, retrieving Morgan's own revolver from the dirt. The balance of power had utterly shifted. "Get on your horse," Ben said, his voice rough from the chokehold. He pointed the gun, not at Morgan, but at the ground between them. "Ride back to whatever hole you crawled from. Tell anyone who asks that Lena Miller died in the desert. Because the woman you knew is gone." Defeated, bleeding, and outmaneuvered, Morgan had no choice. With a furious, agonized effort, he hauled himself into the saddle. He cast one last hate-filled look at Lena, but it was met with her unbreakable gray stare. He turned his horse and kicked it into a limping gallop, disappearing into the gathering twilight. The silence he left behind was vast and ringing. Ben lowered the gun. He looked at Lena. She was staring at the spot where Morgan had vanished, her whole body beginning to shake with the aftermath of adrenaline and released terror. Slowly, Ben walked to the well, pumped a basin of fresh, cool water, and carried it to her. He took the small bloody knife from her rigid fingers and dropped it into the water. Then he placed his hands on her shoulders, turning her gently away from the horizon to face the house, their house, with its lit windows glowing warmly against the dark. "It's over," he said, echoing her words. This time, she broke. A single wrenching sob escaped her, and then she was weeping, deep, cleansing tears for all the years of fear. Ben pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried into his shirt. He didn't shush her. He just held on, a solid anchor in the storm of her past finally passing. When her tears subsided into hiccups, she leaned back, wiping her face with her hands, looking embarrassed. "I am sorry. I did not mean to." "Hush," Ben said, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. A gesture of startling tenderness. "You were magnificent." He led her inside. They cleaned the yard at first light, erasing the signs of the struggle. They told the marshal a sanitized version, a threatening drifter they'd run off. The town, still wary of Lena, also began to see her differently. The story of facing down a troublemaker, even a vague one, added a layer of respect to the mystery. Weeks turned to months. The sharp watchfulness in Lena's eyes softened, replaced by a gradual, dawning peace. She began to unpack her carpetbag, placing a small, smooth river stone on the windowsill, a hairbrush on the stand. One evening, Ben came in from work to find her not at the stove, but at the table, a sheet of paper before her. She was writing a letter. To a friend from Silver Vein, she explained softly. To let her know I am safe. That I am home. The word hung in the air, sweet and solid. Ben nodded, a deep contentment settling in his chest. He had gone to the station expecting nothing and chosen the one thing he truly needed. Not a perfect bride from a catalog, but a partner forged in the same fire as himself. She was the one no one wanted, and she was, without a single doubt, everything he ever would. The end. Final hook. The shadow from Lena's past has been faced and defeated, not just by force, but by their united will. In choosing the outcast, Ben found not a burden, but a warrior and a partner. Their life together, built on honesty and hard-won trust, is just beginning. But it makes us wonder, how many other quiet souls are hiding extraordinary strength, just waiting for one person to see them? Have you ever met someone who surprised everyone by being more than they seemed?